Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey, everybody. So excited to be welcoming Aaron Harper to the podcast today. Aaron went from the fast-paced world of film and TV to becoming a powerhouse in franchising, scaling businesses, and empowering entrepreneurs. After helping grow Patch Boys to over 400 territories, he transformed Rolling Suds from a family-owned power washing business into one of the fastest growing franchises in the country. His strategic approach, cutting-edge marketing, and commitment to franchise success have earned Rolling Suds a spot on Entrepreneur's Franchise 500 and nearly 250 units in just 18 months. Aaron, man, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm really thrilled to get into this convo with you. And before we get too deep into the weeds of, kind of everyday business problems, I'd love to just have you unpack a bit about the story, right? Like, I know this is a long-standing family business. What was that kind of genesis into this franchise model?
Yeah, so I've actually been in the franchise industry for years prior to acquiring this brand, kind of through the franchise through acquisition deal structure. So basically, like the concept of taking a business from one location to a national brand, there's so many things that have to go right in order for that to work. And my experience prior to this was working in franchising. So I helped grow ChemDry to be the largest floor and carpet cleaning franchise in the world. And then they acquired a brand called Patch Boys, which we did more or less a turnaround on, and founder exited. And we basically took it we took it to over 300 units in 2 years. And all of those franchisees opened. They were generally profitable within the first, 3 to 6 months, depending upon, when they opened and all of that kind of stuff. And we became one of the fastest growing franchises in the world for those 2 years. And the company that I was working for offered me like this killer job to take a business from scratch and turn it into a franchise. I would have made about $1 million a year had I taken the role. And I respectfully turned it down because I knew I could do it better on my own. And I just wanted to look for a business to franchise. So I joke, the community that you and I are a part of on Twitter or X or whatever. Like I was a searcher before I even knew what a searcher was. I went and looked at about 24 different businesses and I was like, I'm just trying to find one that I could turn into a franchise. And I didn't know what ETA was. I didn't know, I wasn't part of this Twitter community, but I knew that I knew how to franchise a business. And the concept of franchising a business is the same, whether it's carpet cleaning, drywall, power washing, like you still need to have the same elements in the franchise business. It's just replicating a business model. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is they don't understand franchising in general. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought it was just McDonald's before I got into it. But B, more so, they don't understand that the franchisor is a completely different business than whatever the local operation is. So what's cool about the Wendling family is like they knew they were great at like building a power washing business. And they realized very quickly that franchising is completely different and it's going to cost way more money than they wanted to spend and be way more risky than they wanted to risk. And also going to grow this other business from scratch, more or less, would take away from their $2+ million power washing business. So they were looking for someone like me and I was looking for someone like them. I looked at HVAC and plumbing and roofing and kind of lawn care and garages and all of these different concepts. And I met the founders of Rolling Suds in September of 2022, acquired the brand in January of 23. And I think we're up to about, depending on what my sales team has done this morning, 270 territories across the country.
Dude, that's awesome.
32 states at this point.
What a great story.
It's wild.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's really incredible. Like, I mean, it's incredible for a variety of reasons, right? Like time, just again, like all of the different facets of it. One of the things that,
Thank you.
kind of really struck me, like in our early conversations, it really like piqued my interest was, around how like getting a bit deeper into the weeds, right? Like how you are looking at this business in particular and actually equipping people for success. And I think it's a lot of folks that are unfamiliar with franchising maybe think that's a given. But having been around enough to see like what the different, systems are available through a franchise, what you guys are doing is special. So can you kind of unpack that for folks and like talk, at a deeper level about what, like how did you even learn, to be able to do this stuff and then put the pieces together to ultimately roll it out and, make these guys so successful?
Yeah. So what a franchise does is it essentially de-risks business ownership. There's a lot of variables in business, which marketing companies to use, how to write a job posting, what you should pay your employees, how to price jobs out, which bookkeeping software to use, which field management software to use. Like there are which insurance companies to hire, how much you should pay insurance, which trucks to buy. Is your location where like there are so many variables that a brand new business owner is figuring out from scratch. A good franchise removes as many of those variables as possible through replicability and scalability in multiple markets. And we do that through supplier relationships and service level agreements. We do that through leveraging kind of the buying power of an entire system to negotiate deals for franchise owners. And our list of the support, like the array of support that we provide franchisees is extensive. And so I can go into as much or as little detail as you want. We could talk for 45 minutes just about the support that we provide franchisees, but at a very high level.
Well, I think it's
franchisees. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think, yeah, like, give me the high level, but I do think getting a bit into the weeds with it, like, is super interesting because, again, to your point, there's a bunch of different ways to get to the end result. And part of the magic and part of the ability to go from, zero to where you guys are at is putting all of those pieces together. Like it's, I kind of joke as I talk to a lot of business owners, a lot of folks in business leadership, right? And they're struggling with one location, with getting all of the, kind of A to Z steps in place at one location. And sure, you had to figure that out before you can get to location 2 and so on and so forth, right? But there's some real kind of formulaic ways of doing that. And, kind of you've built the tool set, right?
Right. So, yeah. So what we do, so franchisees sign up, we build their trucks for them. The trucks are kind of our secret weapon. We can do a 3,000 square foot house in about 20 minutes, start to finish, set up, tear down time, everything. And we're going to wash that house faster and more effectively than your average power washer who has a $300 or $400 machine. Additionally, we can do very large jobs that normal power washers cannot do with our trucks. We can hit 5 stories from the ground. We recently did the top of the Superdome right before the big game. We have drones that we'll send out to franchise owners for anything above 5 feet. These are almost $50,000 drones, and we can send them 2 of those within 2 weeks of them needing us to get out there with a pilot, an FAA certified pilot. Like I joke, but we're showing up to a knife fight with machine guns. Like it's just not the same. We're not playing the same game, and our franchisees aren't playing the same game. And this allows us to be super competitive in capturing commercial market share, which when people think of a power washing business, they think of kind of a baby business, starter business. You've got a high school kid that goes and washes driveways and gets paid $50 a driveway. Like that is kind of what people think of when they think of power washing. our trucks are 16-foot box trucks with 1,000 gallons of liquid in, 2 10-gallon per minute machines. We can hit, 5 stories from the ground. We have 1,000 feet of hose. We're doing water towers, stadiums. Like, it's just a different animal. And then what we do to support franchise owners in terms of like getting them launched is we teach them everything that this 35-year-old business has learned after more than 3 decades of iterating. The equipment that we use is proprietary. The process that we use is proprietary. And then we turn on leads for them 5 weeks before training starts. We have cold callers that are doing cold outreach and generating residential leads for them. We have cold emailing companies that are generating commercial leads for franchisees. We expect them to leave whatever it is they're doing full time 4 weeks prior to going to training so they could be selling in their marketplace for 4 weeks before they go. This ensures that they have jobs and estimates on the calendar upon going to training. We help them recruit 2 employees that are going to run the truck because we do not want the franchise owners doing the power washing themselves. Their time is just simply too valuable. They bring those 2 technicians with them to training. One of them is on track to become a general manager within the first 6 months, and the other one works underneath that person and will eventually run his own truck or her own truck. So there are systems for every single thing that we know works for the business based on decades and decades of experience.
Yeah.
And so when someone buys a franchise, very simply, they are buying time and less risk. It takes lots of time and money to figure all of this stuff out, to 35 years to be exact. And we have taken it all and condensed it down and removed as many variables as possible. And franchisees get to essentially rent that business model in order to build their own business that they own 100% of. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And I love it because obviously back to your point earlier, right? It kind of takes, it takes both sides of that. It takes the, 3 decades of innovation to get to a point where it's so effective, so efficient. And so you've got that, kind of tribal knowledge. And then you take the magic of, the sales and marketing and kind of all of that piece of the business that is really, back to your point again, like part of the huge barrier of starting any business, regardless of if we're talking power washing or, consulting or fill in the blank, right? It's putting all of those pieces together is really, becomes kind of this, magic harmony. So yeah, I really appreciate you kind of going into the weeds there a bit with it, because it's just super fascinating stuff. Like, and I'm sure that the founders of the business are just like, kind of probably blown away and beside themselves thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, like we've got this explosive growth, but like, how cool and what a great testament for 3 decades of innovation, 3 decades of survival, right? Like, I mean, I've started a business from zero, so I get that. And it's only been a handful of years. So
yeah, they're fired
awesome.
up. I mean, they didn't know me from Adam when we met. Like, they had no clue who I mean, like, they knew, I mean, obviously about my background and working in the franchise industry, but like, I could have been a bad guy. You know what I mean? Like, I could have not been able to set up their business for success. And honestly, like, given the challenges around how to franchise a business properly, like, it's probably more common than not for them to have gotten set up with someone that doesn't know what they're doing. And the relationship that I have with the Wendling family has just been instrumental, and we wouldn't be where we're at without it. Like, they trust me, I trust them. I talk to them like all the time. Brian Jr., the son of the original founders, who took his dad's business from 800 grand to like 2.2 million in 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. He is now on our executive leadership, on my executive leadership team full time. He focuses on national accounts for franchisees. He just transitioned into that role in the last few months. We're booking national accounts for franchisees because we now have such a big presence that we're able to really leverage that. And like, no one's doing what we're doing. There's no one we're competing with for national accounts. So it's been just a tremendous journey, not to be without its challenges, but really knowing kind of at least generally what to expect going into this was certainly a add value. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think It's kind of like the thing I can equate it to is, when folks will ultimately implement, some sort of ERP or some sort of, kind of key system within their business, right? Like the first one that you do, you learn a lot, you kind of, build this blueprint, but there's always things you take away and say, boy, if I ever have to do this again, here's how I'm moving quicker. Here's, the adjustments that I make. And I'm sure that you were able to take those, some of those lessons and obviously apply the things that you've, worked on previously, even with all of that success, and kind of amplify it, in another iteration. So that's, certainly a testament to not just your skill, but, the opportunity that kind of laid out in front of you. So I'm curious to know, like, for folks that are maybe thinking like, franchise is the way to go. Like, what are some things that, people kind of tend to get wrong, whether that's franchisee interested in coming into, acquire a territory, let's say, or somebody that maybe even has like the idea that, hey, maybe my business, could be a franchise. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So let's do franchisee first, and then I'll do franchisor. So franchisees, I find they, some of them, at least that maybe are coming into franchising for the first time, they might think that like a franchisor is going to do everything for them. It's going to generate all the leads, going to do, and all they have to do is just like check their bank account. That could not be further from the truth. While a franchisor does take a lot of things off of your plate, it is still 100% the franchisee's business to run and grow. And the success of that business is dependent upon the franchisee's ability to sell, hire, fire, build teams, build culture, and execute the model. However, I can't grow a franchisee's business for them. And no franchisor should be doing that. It should be 100% on the franchisee to grow it. And truly, the franchisee is going to be happiest when their efforts on a daily basis drive revenue in the business versus I'm waiting for the franchisor to generate enough leads for me to have my business grow. Like, so I would look at a franchise as a set of tools that you wouldn't otherwise have starting on your own, that you pay an upfront fee and an ongoing royalty for. But you still have to take the tools out and build the house. And, one of the first, I think, questions I get, or I don't do the franchise sales anymore, but like, do I have to go get my own leads, or are you just going to get them all for me? And a lot of franchisors will say, we're going to get them all for you, and you don't have to go generate your own leads, because they want to sell more units. However, like, we're looking for franchisees who want to build massive businesses. Like, we sell a minimum of 2 territories. Most of our deals are 3 to 4 territories, meaning they're going to add 3 to 4 trucks within the first 2 years, which means they're reinvesting, they're growing, they're hiring, they're scaling. Like, there's no, like, they're not drawing a salary. Like, it's like they're building a big business, and we tell them exactly what it takes. And in order to do that, you have to go out and be in your community, developing relationships, shaking hands, asking for the business every single day, until you have enough revenue to build a big sales team and like take a step back from sales. Like, it's just like a normal business that's going to have the same normal business challenges. You just have a team of people and a set of tools that are there helping you succeed. And so that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I hear, is that a franchise is going to do everything for you. The other misconception that I hear regularly, and you've probably seen me write about this because I'm very passionate about it, is a franchise is not a passive investment. You wouldn't go and start an insulation company and just say, I'm going to go hire someone to run my insulation company for me, and I'm going to keep my job full time. You just wouldn't do that. But for some reason, there's a large swath of people who believe that you can do that with a franchise. You can just hire someone, that person will then run the playbook. You pay them $80,000 a year, they'll build you a $2 million business. That also could not be further from the truth. It's not a reality. Like, it's absolutely not a reality. If it was, me and all my friends who know all the brands out there would just buy all the territories, because if it was that easy, we would just own, because we have all the inside knowledge. So if you want to build a great business, Franchising is an awesome mechanism for doing that as a franchisee. However, it's still going to be hard. It's still going to have challenges. You're still going to have sleepless nights. The difference is you have a community to be a part of. You have a set of tools in your toolbox that normal business owners don't have. And I have a team of 25 people that are there supporting franchisees with a full executive team in place who have done the things that they've done this before. So those are probably the two that come to mind at the top of mind for franchisees. Do you want me to go to franchisor now, or do you have any, you want to double click on any of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it all makes sense, right? Like, and I think some of those misconceptions are probably fueled by some of the folks that, are probably selling or marketing franchises, like more from a broad perspective where, if you're interested in, kind of selling units, then it's in your best interest to say like how easy it is versus, being upfront. And like, that's some of the stuff I love about what you share, like across social, right? Like, because it's part of the reason we're all, like in these entrepreneurial communities, because we are in the weeds. We've, done the hard things. We've seen the hard things. We've made the, hard decisions. We've had the hard conversations. We've, at some point failed, sometimes multiple times. Right. So it's all of those things. So it doesn't shock me that that's some of the stuff that you ultimately hear. But I love the way that you kind of speak to it in terms of the folks you're really looking to partner with. And that's the way I would put it from a franchise or perspective, that, you want folks coming into the franchise that are aligned from a vision perspective and that have, a realistic picture of what that's going to take to get there. Because otherwise you're setting yourselves up for failure from the perspective of you're going to have turnover in those markets. And how does that do anybody any good? Right.
Right. And I mean, a franchisor's business and the value of a franchisor's business is entirely dependent upon how well the franchisees do. And what the likelihood for continued and long-term success is for the franchisees. So if I'm setting people up with expectations that they don't have to run the business, that they can check their bank account once a month, they can just pay someone $50,000 to $75,000 a year to run their business for them, like they're going to be set up to fail. And therefore, my business isn't going to be worth anything. And I didn't start a business to have a business that's worth nothing. I started a business to build a legacy for my family and also help franchisees build a legacy for their families, right? And so how do I align that mission? And a lot of that is through the content that I put out, because what you put out is what you attract. And so we find a lot of franchise owners. Yeah. And fortunately, we don't get a ton of those people on my team's calendar because they're like, okay, I'm not gonna, that's not a reality, at least with Rolling Suds. It's not a reality at all, but it's certainly not a reality with Rolling Suds. As it relates to franchisors and misconceptions with franchisors, it's very similar. In the sense that like starting a franchise is not we're going to dip our toes into it and like figure it out and like roll maybe $100,000 into this like endeavor and see how it goes. When you become a franchisor, you have a responsibility to support, train, and do a sufficient knowledge transfer to prospective franchise owners. The franchise business model like doesn't really make a ton of sense till you get to $40 to $50 million in system-wide sales. For some simple back of the napkin math, if you have a 10% royalty and you have 40 million in system-wide sales, that's $4 million a year in recurring revenue. It will cost you at least that to support a network that is generating $40 million in system-wide sales. And in order to get to 40 million in system-wide sales, you will essentially reinvest every single dollar that you generate back from the franchise fees initially back into the business and then some. So a franchisor and also franchisees need the most amount of support when they produce the least amount of royalties. So franchisors have this big layer of support at the top, or they should. And then hopefully over time, the royalties outweigh the cost of the support. But at the beginning, franchisors are typically going to be burning cash. So it costs between $500,000 to $2.5 million to build a national brand, depending on how long it takes to get franchisees open, how long they take to get ramped up. And like, it's just crazy. And franchisors don't know that. And I'm literally writing a book right now to like outline everything I know so that prospective franchisors can say, all right, if I want to do this, like, what is it actually going to take? And so like, I think a lot of franchisors will be like, hey, I've got a great concept. Let's franchise it. But they don't understand that it's a completely different business from what they're used to doing. And it's a startup. And it's a startup that helps people create startups. So it's like inherently one of the most risky things you can do, and probably one of the toughest businesses that you can build.
Yeah, dude, that's super, like, it's super interesting, insightful. And I love that, like, just simple, back of the napkin math, because it's certainly something that I would say is not abundantly obvious when you're thinking about it, right? Like, a lot of people, I would say, take a look at that model and it's like, this is a no-brainer, right? Like, oh, I charge somebody X, I give them like my tool stack, give them a little bit of help here and there, and it's like I'm collecting checks. And so, I'm sure it's a very rude awakening for anybody that really starts to get serious about that path. And I love the way you kind of laid it out. Like you can just hear in that, short 45-second rundown what this really is. And again, I think it speaks to like how cool this relationship really is for you, and like being able to tap into that knowledge on the one side, because what you're building is a completely different, back to your point, it's a completely different business. It's like, has nothing to do with what we actually do, has everything to do with the infrastructure, how we set up those systems. And that's kind of like a follow-up question for you. How did you look at and think through like the kind of, operationalized or systemization of the franchise business itself to be able to support and scale as you're growing these territories?
And that is probably one of the biggest legs up, I suppose, that I had going into franchising this business, that most people that franchise a business just simply don't have. Because your average person that franchises a business is someone who's got a great business and says, I want to franchise this thing, right? Whereas what I did is said, hey, I know how to franchise. I just need to find the right business, acquire the brand, systems, processes, rights, trademarks, and then replicate and turn it into a franchisor. So when I worked at I helped build the second largest portfolio of franchise service brands in the world. We built it from about three brands to, when I left, there were 12, all in residential and commercial services. We had about over 4,000 units in 55 countries. So the knowledge that I gained from doing that allowed me to see, okay, this is what a brand president does. This is what a CMO does. This is what a marketing director does. This is what a business coach does. Here's how to measure a business coach. Here's what their comp structure should look like. All of it. I had a clear vision into. So I kind of knew what the roadmap was, where we were starting. There's also a significant amount of pre-investment required in any business, but with a franchise specifically, because you have to pre-invest in infrastructure, which your infrastructure to support franchisees is going to cost the most amount of money. And you have to basically build infrastructure for where you're going to be in a year, or even a year and a half, depending on how fast you're growing, because those team members need to train up and become, incredibly effective very quickly. So I knew who to hire and when to hire them by, and I knew at what levels they needed to be recruited in order for them to be ready. Again, this is something that most your average franchisors are kind of figuring it out. And so as we've structured this company, I mean, we're built right now as like a very mature franchisor. We've got like over 200 years of franchise experience. I have a full C-suite in place. I am not involved in the day-to-day. I spend all my time either creating content or working on the business, strategy, resource allocation. And I've built it that way on purpose, so that we can provide the best level of support for franchisees. And so, that's a kind of high level answer of how you're, supposed to build a franchisor.
No, dude, that's so incredible. Like, I'm curious, and don't feel compelled to share this, but I'm curious, like, how did you fund for this? Did you raise? Is this all self-funded? And again, feel free to, say I'm not comfortable sharing that, but I'm just curious, like, just from the perspective of, to your point, like pre-planning the infrastructure piece of this, 18 months plus out. And I know what that takes just from a sheer, kind of operations and infrastructure perspective. And, it's not for the faint of heart. So.
Yeah. And especially as it relates to a franchisor, because these franchisees are trusting us to help them. And I will say, like, the first franchisees that buy into a system are typically going to be more entrepreneurial than like the ones that are buying in 3 or 4 years later. But they're still relying on you to create a model that works for them and continue to innovate and kind of be ahead of the curve so that they can be operating and growing their local location while I'm thinking about the bigger picture. So I did raise capital. I recommend that anyone who's deciding to franchise a business has at least $500,000 to $1 million in the bank, ready to deploy. There's a variety of different places that goes, but basically you're going to need to build the support in anticipation of the growth. And the first 3 to 6 to 12 months of a franchisee's business, no matter how good they are at business, is going to be terrifying. And so they, again, need the most amount of support at that time, and they're going to produce the least amount of royalties because they're getting ramped up during that time. And so the more units that you sell, the more infrastructure you need to support franchise owners. And so I raised capital. I specifically was advised to raise smart money. It's one of the best pieces of advice I got. There's a lot of dumb money sitting on the sidelines that wants to be put to work. If you are going to raise dumb money, I would just recommend raising debt instead. I raised from people who have franchised businesses before, on the franchisee and the franchisor side. One of my investors has over 1,000 restaurants across, I think, 11 different concepts. 11 different brands. Wow. And then he sits on 16 boards of franchisors and has grown and scaled and exited multiple franchise businesses over his 30 years in franchising. So he's probably top 3 most respected people in the franchise industry. And I talk to him all the time. And that has helped me because, like, I don't know everything. And so bringing in capital from people who do know a lot more than I do can help me see potential blind spots that I can't see. And so that's been tremendously helpful. Anyone who is thinking about franchising a business and they don't have the experience that I have in franchising, it's okay. I still think that if you have a good model, you should franchise your business. However, it's going to cost more money because you're going to have to find someone like me and give them equity and a good salary and everything to help build your franchise system so that it is sustainable and franchisees can come in and have like a predictable level of success. And just because you have training that you can train your employees on how to do the work, it's completely different when you're training a business owner on how to run a business. It's completely different. You go from being a business owner that's good at tutoring children in math to now you're a coach, you're a mentor, you're a therapist, you're a marketer, you're a cheerleader. Like it's completely different than everything that you've done before. And so having that capital, if you don't have experience, like you're probably going to need more money. I raised a little over $500,000, and we've been profitable from month 3 ever since then. I think there's only been two months that we weren't profitable since then. But we do all of our franchise sales in-house. So we're able to keep a significant portion of the franchise fee. Whereas if you outsource franchise sales to a franchise sales company or something like that, you're giving away a large portion of your franchise fee, which again means you need even more money to support the franchisees. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And again, just kind of incredible to hear from the ground floor. So, 2 kind of rapid fire questions for you. What's the big, hairy, audacious goal for 2025? And then what's a lesson that, you maybe have learned from a mentor, from somebody that you look up to? You mentioned that person that's, been a strategic part of the business, but I'd love to just learn something that, you wish you would have either known or deployed or, picked up from a mentor.
So from a mentor, figure out what you enjoy doing in the business and do whatever you can to get to a position where you get to only do that, or you get to spend the majority of your time doing that thing, meaning you need to hire, train, and recruit for the other things in the business that you don't enjoy doing. A lot of business owners burn out because they just keep doing things that they don't enjoy doing. And they're like, wait, why did I do this? I could have just had a job where like I got paid and I didn't have to have all the stress of like, a business. Whereas like, me, when I started this thing, like I wore a ton of hats, and you're going to in any business that you start. However, like where I'm at now is like I get to do the things that I enjoy doing most that also pull the biggest lever on the business. And it's a lot of it is centered around content creation, writing, recording stuff like I am today with you, podcasting, because that drives like a significant amount of lead flow from a franchisee perspective. But I also just like it. And before this, it was sales. Always been great at sales, but marketing and content is just sales at scale. It's just building relationships with people at scale versus on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
That was kind of a lesson from a mentor that's been helpful. What was the other question? Sorry.
What's the big, hairy, audacious goal for this year? Where do you guys want to be? What kind of benchmarks are you looking to hit in terms of territories? Yeah. So we'll be over 400 units by the end of the year sold. We will be at like 183 open. So we'll have about 183 trucks on the road. Each territory will be basically required at some point to have a truck in it. And that kind of opens it just as you would opening a McDonald's. The difference is the truck goes to customers versus the customers going into the McDonald's. But each territory will have at least one truck in it. So, every franchise brand that scales at the rate that we scale is going to sell more units than they open, but franchisees are going to have a schedule of when they're opening their additional territories that they purchase. So that's kind of the big goal. I'd love to be at like 34 million in system-wide sales, with a run rate to 60 by end of next year or more. Just franchisees that are generally happy and successful. When you launch a franchise system, you are launching a lot of franchisees at the same time, and they rely heavily on us to help them be successful. What's cool though, is they rely on each other. And if you build a great brand and you're as selective as we are with who comes into your system, the franchisees, like if you ask any of our franchisees, they will tell you like probably the best part of their network is the connections that they have with other franchise owners. And that's just one of the greatest things about franchising is like, you're not alone. When you start a business, I mean, you as an entrepreneur, me as an entrepreneur, like you're alone, you're figuring it out. You have no one to talk to. You're like talking to the wall sometimes. And like,
wondering why they don't talk back. Like, as a franchisee, like, you've got other people that are doing the same exact thing that have the knowledge that you need to be successful all at your fingertips. And then like a longer term, kind of big, hairy, audacious goal is $1 billion in system-wide sales. I think it's very reasonable to get there. 1-800-GOT-JUNK did it in about 20 years. And they didn't have any experience in franchising for the first 5 years that he launched his brand. He didn't have any systems really in place at all. He just had a great college junk business in Canada, and then started figuring out, I need to create some systems. And, now they have 3,000 trucks on the road across Canada and US, and they do about $1 billion in system-wide sales. And we're really doing right now to the power washing industry what they came in and did to the junk business in the early 2000s, is just really professionalized it and provided some level of standardization of process and service that simply didn't exist before then. And they paved the way for College Hunks, Hauling Junk, and Junk King, and Junk Luggers, and J-Dog Junk, and all of these brands that have grown since then. And we're doing the same exact thing right now. We're just kind of first to market from a professionalization standpoint.
Yeah. Dude, that's so awesome. Like, so glad that we were able to connect. And I love all the stuff that you put out. So I'm super grateful for you to come on here and kind of share a bit about that and give us a peek under the covers. For anybody that wants to reach out to you, where's the best place for them to connect with you at?
Yeah. So if someone's interested in becoming a franchise owner, the best way would be to go to rollingsuds.com or rollingsudsfranchise.com and submit a request, and you'll be in touch with my team. However, I put out content every single day just about how we're building this company, the things that I'm learning. I'm truly building it in public, because I don't think there's many franchisors that do that. And I think it would probably be helpful. Or at least I hope it's helpful to prospective franchisees and also people who want to become franchisors. So you can follow me on Twitter, Aaron Harper, CEO. If you type in Aaron Harper, I put out a lot of stuff on LinkedIn as well. And then we put out at least one video per day across TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all of the different other sites as well. And that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we put all of those links in the show notes for people to find you easily. Aaron, man, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. So excited to be continuing to follow along and watch you hit those milestones, because I know it's coming. Just having a chance to interact with you here, but also just following along with you for a while and just seeing the stuff that you guys are doing. It's pretty evident to me. Had enough conversations around to recognize something, special when it's happening. So thanks so much, man. And look forward to following the journey.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.